all spoke about being authentic as a leader, and I have often said that too, and I think it is absolutely right. But someone challenged me and said, right, so you want me to bear my anxieties to the world all the time? That's what you want me to do? And I thought, so what would you answer back to someone who worries that their authentic self is an anxiety-ridden person who's telling themselves all the self-talk that we often do and all the guilt? How do you answer the parts of the authenticity and not the sort of anxiety, I suppose?
I got elected to go first. I'm really nervous about this. So I think authenticity is actually a key to who we are and what we do and how we do things. Doesn't mean that I have to share with you all of my concerns. I don't have to tell you every time I'm anxious or nervous or worried, but I do have to be honest with you about who I am, what I believe in, and what I'm willing to do. So I think that's the authentic part for me. It's keeping my integrity. You know, you talked about resigning from a position, and that's a place where you get to where that's where your authenticity, I think, shines through. So when you're able to stand up and say, this really is just something I can't do, and I can't do it because. We've all left jobs like that. I left a job in Sudbury, Ontario for that very reason, where I felt that the policies that I was being asked to put in place were, in fact, harming patients. So people now were having problems because of us, not in spite of us. And at that point, I said, that's where I have to draw the line and walk away. And I think that's the authentic part. So it's fair to share your anxieties. It's fair to tell people that you hate public speaking, but you put yourself out there and do it because it's part of the job. It's fair to admit to all those things. But I think being true to yourself is to be able to still do it, do the things that are important, do the right things, and do things right. And that's the authentic part for me.
Just building on Vickie's comments, I think it's also about having courage occasionally to be that authentic self. And if you think about some of the people that are coming out now and sharing their history of depression or mental illness, which wasn't talked about a decade ago. So it takes a lot of courage sometimes to be that authentic self, to really talk about what you believe in and what is integrally your core. So it doesn't come easily, but I think if you don't do it as a leader, it just doesn't resonate. There isn't this resonance around you if there's that, what I call the do-say contradiction. Do one thing, say another.
That's sometimes a really tricky one. But I think, just an example, I had a workshop yesterday with the climate group, and we had the facilitator, and at the end it was mainly get to know people, but at the end it was like a positive question about what the great things that we can do and what are the positive things. And then the feedback was we haven't actually talked about what the challenges are and the concerns that people have. And I think sometimes we get carried away about it's got to be positive, got to keep going, the energy positive up. And sometimes we just have to, pierce the boil and saying, this is a concern. However, I'm going to try and do my best in my role, and I'm going to try to do this, and I'm not going to try and snow you and keep saying it's all going to be fine. You working really long hours and, falling off the perch at your computer is fine. It's about being really clear and saying, yep, this is what's happening, but here's where I want to go, and being authentic about that. So, and there's a real value in that, because I think sometimes we get caught up in our own bureaucratic, political correct sort of language that sometimes ends up sounding just a little bit hollow.
Just before we leave that, I'm going to add one thing, and that's I've had the opportunity, I think it's an opportunity, many times to speak with Matt and Dave on ABC 891 radio. And the last time that I was on, they were talking to me, and they were getting texts, and they said, we're getting texts saying, you sound honest. I'm thinking, how do you sound honest? I'm not sure how that works. But as I was leaving, they said, off air, they said to me, we don't often hear the frankness and the forthrightness, and so that's what people respond to. And I think, as bad as it was, I was sitting there talking about Oakton, and that's not something that we should ever be proud of. But as bad as it was, being honest and forthright was what people wanted to hear. So not trying to cover it up, not pretending it doesn't exist, but just dealing with it as you can.
There must be heaps of questions. Yeah, come on, I won't ask my question. Go down there. Okay, that's all right. Sorry. Come back.
Hi, I'm Stefan from Water Licensing in the Water Group. Have really enjoyed the presentation. My question is, what achievements are you most pleased with?
I'm saving the world. Haven't quite got there yet. No, I tell you, it's interesting because you automatically go, what outcome, what policy, what deliverable was it? And I think one of what I feel is an achievement is when I moved into the Department for Water, and there were lots of groups, 8 different teams of people were in this group that I thought was established and was joined up, and it most certainly wasn't when I got there. And so I feel like one of my greatest achievements was being able to sort of create a really high-performing group of people who were clearly very talented but had been put into a spot together in a bit of a messy process. And I feel sort of creating, it wasn't just because of me, but creating a branch, a policy branch, which was well regarded and high performing, and I felt that was a really big achievement.
For me, I'm pretty clear about it. I'm here to, and my life, I'd like to think I've changed the world for women and girls, and particularly children. A lot of what I do filters through that lens. One of the things I do is I sit on an international board. It's an international development organisation. I've been chair of it here in Australia and now sit on it internationally. And it's Plan International, and it changes the world for girls, particularly around education, particularly around early marriage and all of the really tough decisions in countries that have different religions, different cultures. And it's like Julia said, I'm here to sort of change the world around climate change. Well, I'm here to change the world around girls.
So I'll be a little bit probably more sanguine. Personally, I think my biggest accomplishment has been 7 children who are fully launched, and I don't have great grandchildren. I've got grandchildren who are great, and the boys and girls, everybody getting along and having a great future. I think that's personally a big accomplishment for me. Professionally, the fact that I get up every day and I still love what I do. I still am able to come to work with enthusiasm and energy and the sense that we're going to accomplish great things and keeping that moving. That's something I'm proud of, because it can get tiresome, and when it gets to that point you need to change what you're doing. So it hasn't got there yet. And the last thing is I've got a file in my desk drawer. So the days that I'm not feeling quite so energized, I pull out that file, and there are notes and emails and letters from people who have said to me how I've impacted their life. And some of the most innocuous emails that I will get from someone who, I heard you speak at this conference and thought, and you made a difference because, or whatever, some small thing, or a patient's family who said, you really helped when Dad was dying. So you pull those out, you remember that, and you think, I've really made a difference in someone's life, even if I haven't saved the world. I've really, really made a difference.
question. One down there.
Hi, my name's Brita. I'm from Julia's team. I'm going to take Julia up on a point she made about when you're speaking to someone above, trying to influence people by getting them to think that it's their idea. So I'm 54 and I've been told that a lot of times, and I've done it a lot of times. And the leaders I really like are the ones who listen to the idea. It's not, I mean, it's my idea as in it's come from me, but it's out there. I'm not into IP. I think that's a real difference in leaders. The leaders who you can talk to and persuade, and they'll honestly say, well, actually, it's not such a good idea, or it is a good idea, I'll take it forward, as opposed to that kind of manipulative, bizarre process that you have to do to convince someone it's their idea. How do you feel when you have to do that, and how are you as a leader? I mean, I've observed you, but yeah. Not do that ever. No, not.
How am I good at manipulating? I don't know. What do you reckon, Sandy? I don't think I'm that good. That's a good question, Brita. So yes, I would say a good leader is someone who can listen to a good idea and see the merit in it and actually progress it. And a good leader will go, and thanks Brita, because it's Brita's idea that came up and she's done a fantastic job, and that's a really good leader. But I think the part of what some of those sort of dot points about the lessons I've learned is understanding the motivation for people. So sometimes people might not take up your idea because fundamentally they might say, we have only got X dollars in the budget. And that's a really great idea, but just can't do it. So then you have to think about, well, how else can I do that? Can I, is it possible to link it to another budget idea that you can almost get a co-benefit from something or other? So I don't mean it in a way in manipulating things, but for me it's like getting the outcome, and I firmly believe in public policy and the importance of the work we do and how that influences things moving forward. And you can look at it in a lot of our work in Juna. And sometimes it's really difficult to get through. So how do you actually influence the people to actually like that idea? If those people absolutely acknowledge it as your idea and run with it and take it further, great. But if they don't, it's still and they do say this is an idea and it's my idea, then for me I feel fine about that, because I feel like I still get the public policy outcome, which is really important. And that is, so I suppose it comes back to all those motivating things you need to know about who are the people we're dealing with. What are the motivating influences of Treasury? What are the motivating influences of a developer of New South Wales and Victoria along the River Murray? What are their motivating things? And how do you actually change the way that they think in a way that you can get that public policy outcome? So I'm not sure if I answered that for you, Brisa.
I just want to give you an example from my perspective of this around what I think is influencing. It's what's the outcome you're trying to achieve, which is exactly what Julie said. And sometimes when you've batted up the ball 2 or 3 times, you've got to sit back and think about, am I the best person here to actually be pitching this? So I was on a board, and one of the things I used to say to the chief executive every meeting was, how come we don't have any women on executive? Oh, well, we go through all the right things, and we do all this and we do that, and we cast the net far and wide. And I said, well, there's got to be something wrong with the culture or barriers in this organisation. And I'd be banging on this every board meeting or every time that sort of the opportunity came up, particularly around diversity. So I decided that I wasn't succeeding. So I took a couple of my fellow board directors out to lunch, the blokes, and I said to them, what is it? Do you believe that we should have women on the executive? Oh, yeah. Well, why is it when, I always, the sort of thing, oh, you do such a great job. Well, I said, I'm not being heard on the organisational radar, let me tell you. So the most influential director put it up. Guess what? CEO's KPIs. Guess what? 2 years later, 2 women on executive. So sometimes it's not about you. You've got to, if you're really committed to the outcome, you've got to look at different ways and different connections to actually get the result that you're actually looking for.
And I think we have to be careful that we don't call it manipulation when what it is packaging. You need to know how to package it and how to get that package in front of somebody. And I don't think that really is manipulation. I think that's steadfastness and persistence and the kind of thing that you need to do sometimes to put the idea in front of the person who can move it forward for you. If you're truly into manipulation, then I think you're going to run into problems down the road with the idea anyway. So really steer clear of that and work at packaging, work at getting something that's going to be the hook that's going to get the interest and being able to move the idea forward.
And I loved your story about trying to get the nose, and that people were far more willing to give up their coat and park your car than we thought. What is it, do you think, that makes us put up those self-imposed barriers?
Well, it does come from quite a bit of research, particularly around women. Women have a very sort of wired way of having to be good at everything before they get started. Having to know it all, having to be perfect. You know, I think Julia's idea of the perfect mother, interactive wear and all that sort of, and that is what is out there in the media. I think it certainly was done. This was based on a research project done at Harvard, and they put 10 women in one room and 10 men in the other. And they gave them exactly the same job and person spec. And the women went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Gosh, I can't do 10. I won't apply. The men went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could get Vickie to do 7. Julia would be really good at 8. They're in the game. They haven't sabotaged themselves by thinking they had to do it all before they got started. And that is something as women that we tend to do. We tend to self-sabotage unless we can do it perfectly and have all of the things covered before we get started. So if there's one thing I'll ask you to think about is get in the game.
Renate Velzenboer, I'm from the Conservation, Sustainability and Wildlife Management Unit. If you had to do it all over again, like in your career, what would you do differently?
So, I might not have had all 7 kids so close together. That's not true. I didn't have them all. It's mergers and acquisitions, but we had a whole ton of kids all at the same time. Truly, I think I did my degree in nursing, and I've said that I became a nurse by design. I became a CEO by accident and sort of fell into jobs. I didn't really have a clear career path in mind. I took jobs as they came along. I applied for things because I knew who else had applied and didn't want to work for them. All those really good reasons for doing that, So I think I'd have a bit more purpose. And I'd also probably do my master's before I did it. I did a master's in business administration. Graduated from that in 2005 and only did it then because I was forced to. The board that I was working for said, okay, it's time for you to do a master's and we're going to pay for it and you have to do it. And I said, I don't want to. Didn't get anywhere with them and did it. So what I learned in that program changed a lot of what I think, because while it validated things I knew instinctively, it also gave me the science and the argument and the business acumen behind a lot of the things that I hadn't been able to do up until that point. So I would not close my mind to opportunities like that if I was to do it over again. I'd probably take those kinds of opportunities faster. But I wouldn't have changed any one of the jobs that I've had. I have loved every one of them and learned so much from each of them that I can't imagine. Even this one, I couldn't imagine having said no to. And maybe after we go through, I've never been inside government during an election cycle, so maybe next March I'll feel differently. But for now, still really excited about it, so wouldn't change much of that.
A little like Vickie, 3 children under 3 was quite a sort of task in those early days, particularly one with a disability. Looking back, I probably wouldn't change a lot. What would I do differently? I'd probably seize more opportunities along the way. I think learning what I know now about having to be good at everything before you get started was a big life learning lesson for me. I think never underestimate what education and or development can do for you. I started my journey, if I had it again, I'd started earlier. I started that journey in my early 40s. I look around the room, a lot of you are a lot younger than that, so that's what I'd do differently. I'd certainly stop worrying, stop sweating the small stuff, thinking, you know, that thing called work-life balance. There isn't any such thing as work-life balance. Just get on with it. And I'd take some more time to, I think Vickie said this, I'd take some more time to celebrate the successes rather than focusing on what I hadn't done and celebrating the good things in life.
Sort of similar, really. I think I would have liked to persisted a little bit more in my journalism side of things. I love Sally Sarah. I sort of wish I was a foreign correspondent somewhere with a flat jacket, only in the real safe parts. And and I think I sort of would have liked that a bit. I think also having young children and working, I would sort of stop beating myself up a bit about it. And parenthood, motherhood is a guilt trip. And having that been brought up Catholic, I'm really good at guilt, and and it's not good for you. Our kids are all going to be fine. Don't feel bad about being in childcare and and me institutionalising mine 5 days a week and terrible mother. And that's a really, really important one. Don't feel, because sometimes we put our children, we're sort of doing our careers and we're trying to be good mothers and feel that we're not really being as best mothers as we could, or fathers, and on the other side going, not completely being as great at the job as I want to be. And so I think being a little bit, giving myself a bit more of a break is probably one of the biggest lessons.
I think you're right, and I think the other thing to remember is to pick some things that are important. Talking about motherhood, I had to be away a lot. I wasn't always there, but it was important to me. It made not one iota difference in that child's life if I called them, but it made a big difference to me to call before they went to bed, to say goodnight, I love you, and we sang a little song. It was Baby Beluga. We sang those songs, and I can remember saying to a minister of health at about 7:15 one night, we just have to take a 5-minute break. And he said, we're in the heat of the discussion. I said, I'll be right back. And leaving and going out to a payphone and calling home and singing Baby Beluga, and the deputy minister walking by and saying, you're kidding. And like I said, made not one difference to that child that I did that or had not done that night, but it makes a difference to me. So finding out what's important to you and doing those things, for sure.
Hi, my name's Jodie. This isn't a perfectly formulated question yet, but I'm going to ask it anyway. With health has seen a change in policy from treatment to preventative measures such as health in all policies, and our department has been working on things like nature play and healthy parks, healthy people. I guess we're here today celebrating women and leadership, and I guess we've also got other causes that we're interested in. We just wanted to ask a question about your experience with assisting, possibly with those transformative policies. Yeah. You got anything to add, Meryl?
I guess from the background of women, back in the 60s being having that glass ceiling, we're sort of coming from the angle of what can Aboriginal people learn from your experiences about breaking that glass ceiling in bringing health back to communities, back to Aboriginal people, and in an environment where it's very, very white, very male. I mean, things have changed, but, you know, how do you change from an Indigenous perspective?
Well, that's a tough question, and I think we could probably do a dissertation on that subject. I think one of the great failings, we are in exactly the same place in Canada as I find us here in Australia. When we look at our Indigenous people and the problems that they're facing, the mental health issues, the substance abuse, the hopelessness, some of the very squalid conditions that they live in, and how do we make, when we think about ourselves in terms of being, you know, the healthiest communities, and yet there's whole factions of our people that just are not healthy at all, and we haven't made very much progress there. One thing I will tell you, something that gives me hope, this is the first place I've ever lived where at the beginning of every session we recognize our origins, and we pay respect and give credence to the land that we serve, that we stand on, that it is the land of the Kaurna people in this circumstance. And I've never experienced that before, where we do that so consciously every time. So maybe there is a bit of hope here about being able to do it. Health in all policies is an important piece. Again, born in South Australia, and 10 years ago, I think it's just been through its first decade. Internationally known, I don't know how well it's known in Australia, but internationally well respected. People aspire to have the same kind of achievement. We can do more. We can never stop, and we have to, I think, health in all policy and Indigenous people in all health. So if we can keep it rolling and move it forward, it's a long road, but if we don't keep trying, we'll never get there.
One of my experiences has been working with Indigenous women is when you sit down and listen and talk to them, they have the same aspirations, they have the same dreams, they have the same desires for their children that we have. And in all the work I think you do, in all the work we all do, we've got to look for opportunities to empower those women, to give them support, to actually truly recognise the great things that they actually do. It is a small start, but you've got to start somewhere. And for me, it's always about starting with the family, and the women will always look for how can they change this dynamic into a better dynamic. So I reach out to all of you in every iteration I can. I always look for what opportunity can I do in my work to shift and change just one small conversation, one small interaction, because that's what it takes.